Welcome to On Cooldown, the WoW show, where we discuss the life expectancy of Blizzard and why upgrading your phone will prepare you for PC gaming in 2019. In today's episode, Blizzard is pulling the plug on Heroes of the Storm. Patch 8.1 is shafting crafted gear. Artifact knowledge, wait, wasn't that in Legion? Is put to a halt since we already have so much to do before the raid. We could use one or two fewer things to worry about. And a Greek-style Q&A with Ian that answers the community's burning questions. Hello everybody. It's an exciting time to be a Blizzard fan. Alright guys, generally Marcelian and I like to keep things as positive as we can. Not unnecessarily positive, but we think positivity creates a more productive atmosphere and alleviates stress to increase creativity, plus it's healthier. But you know, sometimes we have to point things out, and I don't want you guys to think that this is salt or simply lashing out, but criticizing, and hopefully in a constructive manner. And all of this should bring change about. We've seen these changes before, so hopefully for the future as well. So let's talk about these so-called changes. Ian did a Q&A recently with the Greek community. Why the Greek community? Well, it was probably because there were legitimate questions compiled in the Greek community by the Greek players, but it might also be because Ian has Greek heritage. Not going to comment on that. I think it's actually cool bringing a spotlight on different segments of the WoW player base. Among the common questions that were answered, because I can bet my sweet sushi there were harder hitting questions that might have been omitted, were a few we already knew. There were questions that we were hoping could spark some changes, questions like Titan Forging, which to be honest Ian answered again, explaining why they opt for the system and why it's here to stay. This is something I personally disagree with. I understand gear needs to have this exciting moment when it drops, and giving this moment to Titan Forging seems like the wrong way to do it. I was excited getting gear when the system wasn't around. When that one pair of epic gloves dropped from Black Temple, I thought of them the whole week. And that was just a shitty BOE leather glove pair. Or was it boots? I think it was called something then mother. So gear can be exciting without Titan Forging. But maybe this is a bad example because this happened over 10 years ago and now we are into 2018. 2019 soon, hopefully. But I play other RPGs as well with different loot systems. I don't feel like the loot can bring more excitement by assigning a second RNG factor in obtaining it. I think the excitement should be kept solely for the moment the loot drops and not if it drops in the right state. I still hope this can be addressed in the future. I still think that manually, individually forging your gear for more eye level is a lot more provocative than having no control over it. Or at the very least, hey, shh. WoW dev guys, you listening? I don't want a job for this, but here's an idea. How about capping the Titan Forging to be at the very most the eye level of the next difficulty tier? Like normal gear can only Titan Forge to reach or almost reach heroic level gear. I still feel people can feel excited about Titan Forging if it was 5 or 10 max eye levels better. It's still a better item, it's not so much better that will make the base version feel like, oh man, it's not Titan Forged. Am I talking out of my ass? So this was one question of the Q&A that I hoped could have been considered more. The second one I found worth mentioning, and I know I will be burned by some of you guys for this, is the Master Loot situation. I raided with Master Loot before and I had positive and negative experiences with it. I think this puts me in the middle of the curve when it comes to the level of dedication a WoW player can put into his raids. Essentially, Ian was asked why did they take Master Loot out and or if it will be back. Ian gave a standard developer answer, the answer he gave before in previous Q&As, but even though you didn't ask for it, I will give you my answer. I 100% agree that Master Loot can be tremendously productive for very organized guilds, and guilds who are very serious about their raid progression. They don't have to be mythic raiding guilds. I raided with heroic focus guilds that used master loot and I had no issues with it. On the other side of the spectrum, and sometimes a part of the community tends to forget about these players, I applied for guilds and I was a trial. While I was a trial, I was not a priority for getting loot, and I would go 1 or 2 resets without getting a single piece of loot, which sucked considering every raiding week is important if it's during the gearing process of players to tackle down harder difficulties. Of course, this was before Mythic Plus and other sources of gear I could obtain to keep my eye level relevant, but that didn't exclude the fact that my tier sets were building slower with this. Now, this only happened to me once or twice, so it wasn't a big deal, but it's still a reality for certain players that can be locked out of their weekly loot like this. And of course, I won't be talking about situations where master loot is even abused. With that being said, in a very organized guild with focus on progression, personal loot can still work since we can trade items. Less so when the item is an upgrade for the person it dropped, since it's automatically a soulbound item. But if they want to keep master loot out of the game, I think it could be better if the items that drop in a raid can be traded regardless if it's an upgrade or not. I'm not sure how this would work in practice, because you could say that people can feel compelled by their guild to trade their upgrade so they can keep their spots. But this is up for the players to decide and control. I strongly believe more freedom is better, even if the system has risks. I think it's kind of shitty that our loot and progression is being controlled by the devs, and this extends to other aspects of the game as well. What happened to play an MMO and create your own story? It feels more like we are playing an MMO and playing out Blizzard's story with the reins in their hands, and if we stray from the path, they can pull on those reins and bring us back to farming island expeditions. This is all my opinion, but I'm genuinely curious if there are any other players out there that feel similar. The rest of the questions felt a bit generic and already addressed, except for one, professions, and this actually ties to another topic I wanted to approach. As you might have had the unfortunate experience to encounter, as 8.1 was released, people found themselves not able to wear certain items. Those certain items were the crafted items, because patch 8.1 now brings in a change that was not mentioned since the entire time 8.1 was on PTR. That change affects crafted gear to require your profession to be maxed in order for you to wear it. You cannot use crafted plate pants without having your Kultiran blacksmithing skill maxed. This issue, as with many other issues, is multi-layered. The most immediate layer that was already addressed, thankfully, was the fact that people found themselves with admittedly expensive crafted items that couldn't be used and equipped. So they were naked, at least for those item slots. This was reverted, of course, so you can use your crafted gear, but all future crafted gear will have the profession requirements still in place. Now, the second layer to this problem was the fact that this wasn't communicated earlier. Yeah, it's a shitty move, but if we had known, heck, from freaking BlizzCon, that this will be a case, we would have either looked for replacements or considered leveling the profession required for us to wear said items. And this is all coming back to bite them in the butt, since the devs already mentioned in previous Q&As and other occasions no doubt, that they value communication and strive to keep it, well, there. Tell me then, how was it that this was not mentioned for what has been like, what, 3 months of PTR testing? Was it something someone forgot? You're telling me that in 2018, a dev working for one of the biggest games and companies in the world has forgot to mention this tiny little detail? Or did they decide on this on the last minute? Same thing with artifact knowledge cap. If you didn't know already, we have artifact knowledge like in Legion, it's just not apparent or something we can control. The artifact knowledge essentially speeds up our neck leveling process so it can keep up with the increasing levels of gear and requirement to actually use said traits. Now, the cap has been placed to slow down players in leveling their necks, which means that when Battle for Dazala lore will be out, you might, or more likely will, not be able to use all the traits from the gear that drops because your neck is too low of a level. Unless of course you want to sack your family dinners and farm world quests and island expeditions all the time through Christmas to hopefully be able to use the gear that you worked to get in the first place. Again, something that was not communicated when the devs claimed time and time again that communication is so important to them. And on to the biggest piece of news. Heroes of the Storm is getting the talk. Looking back, I think they have been hinting about this before. Essentially, Blizzard is cancelling the HGC and Heroes of the Storm for 2019. So no support for HOTS esports coming from Blizzard. The game will be put on a long-term sustainability, which essentially means life support. Similar to what we have for the classic games. This means there will still be development, the servers will still be up, we'll still have new heroes, but the HOTS team will be smaller. Some of the devs will be moved to other projects. And can we please stop with the "we now have more projects than napkins in your grandma's cupboard" line? It's a very hard line to swallow after the two most recent games Blizzard has announced to be working on, Battle for Azeroth and Diablo Immortal. These two are not the best examples of the great games Blizzard is known to release. And at this point, it sounds like an excuse for not giving us what we want or ruining what we already have. But I digress. So essentially they are pulling the plug on HOTS, and for me it's sad, but I can't say I'm 100% surprised. However shitty this sounds. HOTS was simply not pulling the numbers. It was operating in a very saturated market, essentially contesting with League and Dota 2. Dota 2 being a game they could have developed if they wouldn't have turned down the original map creator in the first place, may I remind you. And although this sucks for casual players like myself, I cannot begin to imagine how this will affect the pro players. Players with team contracts, gaming houses, dreams and goals for HOTS for 2019. Blizzard is still a company that created its community and internal team with passionate people. As long as the passion remains, we can see things turn around. I remember when people complained so much about WoDs killing WoW for good, and then we had Legion. I'm not sure though if they can give up on BFA and do another Legion-like expansion that will put WoW back on the table. At this point, if these things aren't addressed in BFA, I don't really want to finish that sentence. Wow. Alright. This is pretty much what happened the last week. All is not over. WoW is fun. Still, I am enjoying Tides of Vengeance since I'm getting to try out Priest and Shaman changes. The PvP scene is doing great and I like watching arena championships now more than ever. So it's only fair to point out the good things alongside the bad. Let's keep an eye out for how things are progressing, and if you have something to say, and I know you do, leave a comment down below. Also, if you like our content, consider supporting us with a like and subscribe. WoW is and will always be our passion, and we enjoy what we do, and we sincerely hope we can do it for a lot more time to come. I hope you have an amazing weekend. Happy holidays to all you crazy bastards around the world. Peace.